The Texas sun hung low over Bluebonnet Ranch as Samuel Sam Carter led Bartoli, his prized Angus bull, toward the old weathered barn. At 62, Sam had spent 4 decades working this 200-acre spread outside Millerville, Texas, population 1,847. He knew every fence post, every pasture, and certainly every mood of his livestock. But Bartoli was acting like Sam had never seen before. The massive 2,000-pound bull planted his hooves in the red dirt, muscles rippling beneath his black coat as he threw his head back and released a bellow that echoed across the rolling hills. Bartoli's dark eyes rolled white with terror, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth as he backed away from the barn entrance with surprising agility for such a large animal. "Easy, boy," Sam murmured, adjusting his worn Stetson against the late afternoon glare. "What's got you spooked?" Bartoli had been Sam's companion for 8 years, since the day Sam bought him as a yearling calf from the Henderson Ranch up in Tyler. The bull had faced down coyotes, stood calm during thunderstorms, and never shown fear of anything. Bartoli was the kind of animal that earned respect from other ranchers, steady, reliable, with an intelligence that sometimes unsettled visitors. Now that same bull was backing away from the old barn like it harbored something evil. The barn itself showed its age. Built in 1952 by Sam's father, William Carter, it had weathered decades of Texas storms, tornado warnings, and the relentless summer heat that could crack wooden beams. The red paint had faded to rust brown, and several boards had warped enough to create gaps that leaked golden afternoon light. Sam had been meaning to repair those gaps for months, but ranch work never stopped. Between maintaining fences, caring for his 40 head of cattle, and managing the small crop of winter wheat that kept the operation profitable, barn maintenance had fallen to the bottom of his priority list. Bartoli snorted and pawed the ground, his massive head swinging back and forth as if trying to dislodge some terrible scent. The bull's behavior triggered Sam's instincts honed by decades of reading animal behavior, weather patterns, and the subtle signs that separated successful ranchers from those who went under. The afternoon heat was oppressive, typical for September in East Texas. Sweat dampened Sam's work shirt as he studied Bartoli's distress. In all his years of ranching, Sam had learned to trust animal instincts. Cattle could sense weather changes, predators, and dangers that human awareness missed entirely. Bartoli's refusal to enter the barn wasn't stubbornness, it was a warning. Sam had planned to store the new hay bales inside the barn before evening. 37 bales he'd cut from the north pasture that morning. The work needed to be finished before tomorrow's predicted rain, but Bartoli's behavior made him reconsider the urgency of the task. "All right, boy," Sam said, releasing the lead rope. "You stay out here. I'll check the barn myself." Bartoli immediately trotted away to a safe distance of about 50 yards, turning to watch Sam with what looked remarkably like worry in his dark eyes. The bull's retreat confirmed Sam's growing suspicion that something was seriously wrong inside the barn. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the ranch yard, and the wind carried the distant sound of cattle lowing in the far pastures. Everything seemed normal except for Bartoli's unprecedented terror of a building he'd entered hundreds of times without incident. Sam approached the weathered double doors with the cautious respect that came from understanding that ranching was inherently dangerous work. Every year, Texas agricultural workers died from accidents involving livestock, machinery, or structures that seemed safe but harbored hidden threats. The barn doors hung slightly askew on hinges that hadn't been oiled in too long. As Sam grabbed the worn wooden handle, he caught a whiff of something that made his stomach turn. Not the usual barn smells of hay, leather, and aged wood, but something organic and wrong. Something that reminded him uncomfortably of the time he'd discovered a dead coyote trapped in his grain silo 3 summers back. Bartoli's distant lowing carried across the pasture, a sound of warning, of loyalty, of a faithful animal trying to protect his human from a discovery that would change everything. Sam pulled open the barn door, and the smell hit him like a physical force. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to follow along with our upcoming stories. The afternoon sunlight spilled into the barn's dim interior, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden beams. Sam covered his nose with his sleeve, fighting the urge to retreat as his eyes adjusted to the shadows. The smell was unmistakable now. the sweet, cloying odor of decomposition that every rancher learned to recognize. But this wasn't the smell of a dead animal. Sam's boots echoed on the wooden floor as he moved deeper into the barn, past the hay bales stacked against the far wall, past the old farm equipment covered by canvas tarps. The workbench where 3 generations of carters had repaired tools and tack sat undisturbed, exactly as Sam had left it the week before. But something was different about the floor. In the corner where shadows pooled deepest, Sam noticed a section of wooden planks that didn't match the rest. The original floor was weathered oak, darkened by decades of use and oil stains from farm equipment. These boards were newer pine, slightly misaligned with the original planking, and held down with machine-cut nails instead of the hand-forged ones his father had used in 1952. Sam felt his blood chill as understanding dawned. Someone had torn up part of the barn floor and hastily replaced it. The smell was coming from underneath those boards. Outside, Bartoli released another anxious bellow, the sound carrying across the Texas landscape like a warning. The bull's distress was so profound that Sam could see cattle in the distant pastures lifting their heads from grazing to stare toward the barn with alert suspicion. Sam walked to his workbench with trembling hands, retrieving a crowbar from among the tools that had served 3 generations of his family. The iron bar felt heavy as he gripped it, weighted with the knowledge that whatever lay beneath those boards would destroy the peace he'd found in ranch life. At 62, Sam had buried enough heartbreak to last several lifetimes. His wife Elena had lost her battle with breast cancer 5 years ago, leaving him alone on the ranch they'd built together over 30 years of marriage. Their son Michael had died in Afghanistan in 2018, an IED explosion that had torn apart not just a military convoy, but Sam's faith in the future. The ranch had become his sanctuary after those losses. The rhythm of seasons, the honest work of caring for animals, the simple loyalty of creatures like Bartoli, it all provided structure when grief threatened to overwhelm him. The land didn't judge, the cattle didn't ask questions about his pain. They just needed care, and caring for them had kept Sam functional when everything else fell apart. Now Bartoli was warning him that even this sanctuary harbored dark secrets. Sam positioned the crowbar at the edge of the first newer board and applied pressure. The wood groaned as nails pulled free from the underlying joists, releasing a stronger wave of that terrible smell. He fought back nausea as he pried up successive boards, revealing a rectangular section of disturbed earth beneath the barn floor. The soil was dark and rich, different from the surrounding clay. It had the loose texture of earth that had been recently dug and refilled. And mixed with that soil were fragments that made Sam's hands shake as recognition dawned. Pieces of fabric, something that looked like leather, perhaps a belt or boots, and there, catching the afternoon light that streamed through the barn door, the unmistakable gleam of metal. Sam pulled out his cell phone with trembling fingers, the device slipping in his sweaty palm. His first instinct was to call Chief Bobby Raines at the Millerville Police Department, but something stopped him. The Millerville PD consisted of Chief Raines and 2 deputies who mostly dealt with traffic violations and weekend drunken disorderlies. This discovery was beyond their capabilities. More importantly, Sam realized with growing unease, whoever had buried something in his barn had access to his property. They'd done the work inside a locked building, taking time to carefully replace the floorboards and clean up evidence. This wasn't a random crime. It was deliberate, planned, and carried out by someone who knew the ranch's routines. Someone who might still be watching. Outside, Bartoli continued his agitated pacing, occasionally releasing low bellows that seemed to echo Sam's growing fear. The bull's behavior suggested they weren't alone on the ranch. Animals could sense human presence long before people became aware of being watched. Sam made his decision. Instead of calling local law enforcement, he dialed the number for the Texas Rangers office in Tyler. The Rangers had jurisdiction over major crimes, and whatever was buried in his barn definitely qualified as major. Texas Rangers, this is Sergeant Martinez. This is Samuel Carter, Sam said, his voice steadier than he felt. I'm calling from Bluebonnet Ranch outside Millerville. I think I've discovered human remains on my property. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Sir, are you certain about what you found? Sam looked down at the disturbed earth, at the fabric and metal fragments emerging from the soil. I'm certain, and I think whoever put them here might still be around. My bull is acting like there are strangers on the property. Don't touch anything else, Mr. Carter. We're sending a team immediately. Are you in a safe location? Sam realized he wasn't. Standing in a barn with an improvised grave, possibly being watched by whoever had created it, definitely didn't qualify as safe. I'll wait outside with my livestock. They'll warn me if anyone approaches. As Sam backed toward the barn door, keeping the disturbed earth in sight, he caught another glimpse of metal among the soil fragments. It wasn't just random metal. It had a distinctive shape that made his stomach drop. It looked like a badge. A law enforcement badge, tarnished with age and partially obscured by dirt, but unmistakably official. Sam's mind raced through the possibilities, none of them good. Had a police officer been murdered and buried on his ranch? When? By whom? And most terrifying of all, were the killers still connected to local law enforcement? Outside, Bartoli had positioned himself where he could watch both the barn and the access road that led to the ranch. The bull's protective instincts were in full force, his massive body acting as an early warning system for any approaching threats. Sam joined his faithful bull in the fading afternoon light, both of them keeping watch over a discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about their quiet corner of East Texas. The Texas Rangers arrived 47 minutes after Sam's call, their white Crown Victoria kicking up a cloud of red dust as it turned onto the ranch's gravel drive. Bartoli snorted and shifted his massive weight, but remained calm. The bull's agitation seemed reserved specifically for the barn and whatever secrets it contained. Sergeant Maria Martinez stepped out of the vehicle first, a compact woman in her early 40s with steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. Her partner, Ranger Jake Sullivan, was younger, but carried himself with the quiet authority that came from years of investigating serious crimes across rural Texas. Mr. Carter? Martinez approached with measured steps, her hand resting casually near her sidearm. I'm Sergeant Martinez. This is Ranger Sullivan. We understand you've made a disturbing discovery. Sam nodded toward the barn, noting how both rangers immediately scanned the property for potential threats. Inside the barn, someone buried what looks like human remains under the floorboards. There's also what appears to be a law enforcement badge. Sullivan's expression sharpened. A badge? You're certain? Certain enough that I didn't want to call local PD until I knew more about what we're dealing with, Sam replied carefully. The two rangers exchanged a look that carried layers of meaning Sam couldn't interpret. Martinez pulled out a digital recorder and activated it. Mr. Carter, before we examine the scene, I need to ask some questions. When did you last enter that barn? Last Tuesday. I was storing equipment after working on fence repairs in the south pasture. Did you notice anything unusual then? Sam thought back to the previous week, trying to remember details that had seemed unimportant at the time. No, but I wasn't paying attention to the floor. I was focused on getting the post hole digger cleaned and put away before rain moved in. Who else has access to your property? Sullivan asked, pulling out a notebook. Nobody regular. The UPS driver comes up the main road maybe twice a month. My neighbor Jim Hendricks sometimes cuts through the north pasture when he's checking his cattle, but he doesn't come near the barn. Martinez gestured toward Bartoli, who continued watching them with alert interest. Tell us about your bull's behavior. You mentioned he refused to enter the barn? Bartoli's been my companion for 8 years. He's never shown fear of anything. Coyotes, storms, tractors backfiring. But today he went absolutely crazy when I tried to lead him toward the barn. He somehow knew something was wrong long before I did. The Rangers spent several minutes documenting the exterior of the barn, photographing the building from multiple angles and noting the condition of the doors and surrounding area. Sullivan examined the ground for footprints or vehicle tracks, finding nothing recent except Sam's own boot prints. The perpetrator was careful, Sullivan observed. Whatever happened here, they took time to clean up evidence. When they finally entered the barn, both Rangers immediately covered their noses against the smell. Martinez activated a powerful LED flashlight, illuminating the disturbed area where Sam had pried up the floorboards. Jesus, Sullivan whispered, crouching beside the exposed earth. Mr. Carter, you were right to call us. The afternoon light revealed more details that Sam had missed in his initial shock. Mixed with the soil were fragments of clothing, what looked like pieces of a uniform shirt, badly decomposed. The metallic object was indeed a badge, though years of burial had tarnished it nearly black. Martinez photographed everything before carefully extracting the badge with latex gloves. She rubbed away enough dirt to reveal a portion of the inscription. "Millerville Police Department," she read aloud. "Badge number 103. Sam felt his blood turn to ice. Officer Danny Reeves. He disappeared 6 years ago while investigating vandalism reports at abandoned properties around the county. The official story was that he'd had some kind of mental breakdown and walked away from his job and family. "You knew him?" Sullivan asked. Danny was a good kid. Just 28, married to Sarah Beth Morrison, had twin daughters who were barely walking. There's no way he would have abandoned his family voluntarily. Martinez and Sullivan exchanged another loaded glance. Martinez spoke carefully. "Mr. Carter, we're going to need to call in the crime scene unit and the medical examiner. This is now a homicide investigation. But I need you to understand something. If Officer Reeves was murdered and buried on your property, the people responsible had access to your land and your routines. They may still be monitoring the situation." The implications hit Sam like a physical blow. Someone had used his ranch as a dumping ground for a murdered police officer. They'd taken time to dig a grave, dispose of the body, and carefully replace the barn floor to hide evidence. The level of planning suggested this wasn't a crime of passion, but a calculated elimination. "There's something else," Sullivan said, examining the soil more closely. "This burial site is too neat, too organized. Whoever did this has experience disposing of bodies." Martinez's radio crackled with an incoming call. "Sergeant Martinez, this is dispatch. We have Chief Raines from Millerville PD requesting an update on the Carter Ranch situation. He says it's urgent." Sam saw both rangers stiffen. Martinez keyed her radio. "Tell Chief Raines this is an active Texas Rangers investigation. We'll contact local law enforcement when appropriate." "He's insisting on immediate information, Sergeant. Says he has jurisdiction." "He doesn't have jurisdiction over homicide investigations involving missing police officers," Martinez replied firmly. "Tell him we'll be in touch." After signing off, Martinez turned to Sam with a serious expression. "Mr. Carter, I need you to think carefully. Has anyone from the Millerville Police Department been on your property recently? Any welfare checks, following up on reports, anything that might have given them opportunity to access your barn?" Sam's mind raced back through recent months. Chief Raines stopped by maybe 3 months ago. Said someone had reported seeing suspicious activity on rural properties, and he was checking with all the landowners. He asked to look around, said it was routine. "Did he go into the barn?" "I gave him a tour of the property. He was particularly interested in the barn, asked about the history of the building, whether I'd done any recent renovations." Sullivan closed his notebook with a sharp snap. "Mr. Carter, I think you and your bull just uncovered something much bigger than a single murder. Officer Reeves wasn't just killed, he was silenced. And whoever silenced him has been using your property as their personal cemetery." Outside, Bartoli released a low, rumbling bellow that seemed to echo Sam's growing fear. The bull's protective instincts were telling him that the discovery in the barn was just the beginning of something much more dangerous. As the Texas sun set behind the rolling hills, casting long shadows across Bluebonnet Ranch, Sam realized that his quiet sanctuary had become the center of a conspiracy that reached into the very heart of Millerville's law enforcement. And somewhere out there, the people responsible for Danny Reeves's murder were watching, planning, and preparing to protect their secrets at any cost. By 9 p.m., Bluebonnet Ranch had been transformed into a crime scene processing center. Texas Rangers' vehicles lined the gravel driveway, their emergency lights painting the old barn in alternating red and blue. The medical examiner's van had arrived 2 hours earlier, followed by a forensics team that was now carefully excavating Danny Reeves's remains. Sam sat on his front porch with Bartoli positioned protectively nearby, watching the controlled chaos of a major investigation. The bull remained alert, his dark eyes scanning the tree line that surrounded the property. Every few minutes, Bartoli would snort and shift his massive weight, as if sensing threats that human awareness couldn't detect. Sergeant Martinez approached the porch, her expression grim in the harsh LED work lights that now illuminated the barn. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk. What we've found changes everything." Sam gestured to the empty rocking chair beside him, Elena's chair, which he'd never been able to bring himself to remove from the porch. What did you find? Officer Reeves didn't die from a single gunshot or knife wound, Martinez said, settling into the chair. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment suggests he was tortured before being killed. This was an interrogation that went too far, or was designed to send a message. Sam felt his stomach drop. Danny was a good kid. What could he have known that would justify torture? That's what we're trying to figure out. But there's more. Martinez pulled out her notebook, though Sam suspected she had the details memorized. We found a cell phone buried with the body. The forensics team managed to recover data from the memory card. After 6 years underground. It was in a waterproof case. Danny was apparently expecting trouble and took precautions to preserve evidence. Martinez paused, choosing her words carefully. The phone contains photos and audio recordings that document systematic corruption in the Millerville Police Department going back at least 8 years. Sam stared across his property toward the distant lights of Millerville, a town he'd considered home for 4 decades. What kind of corruption? Drug trafficking primarily, but also protection rackets, evidence tampering, and what appears to be a murder-for-hire operation targeting anyone who threatened to expose the conspiracy. The scope of what Martinez was describing hit Sam like a physical blow. Millerville was a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. If the police department was operating as a criminal organization, the corruption would touch every aspect of community life. Chief Raines? Sam asked, though he already knew the answer, up to his neck in it. According to Danny's recordings, Raines has been the point man for coordinating drug shipments through the county. The department provides security for the operation and eliminates threats in exchange for a percentage of profits. Bartoli suddenly tensed, his massive head turning toward the access road that led to the ranch. The bull's ears pricked forward, and he released a low rumble that carried across the property like a warning. We've got company, Sam said, following Bartoli's gaze. Martinez was already reaching for her radio when headlights appeared in the distance. 2 vehicles were approaching the ranch, moving slowly and deliberately. All units, we have incoming vehicles on the access road. Unknown intentions. Ranger Sullivan emerged from the barn, his hand resting on his sidearm. The forensics team continued their work under the bright lights, but Sam could see additional rangers taking defensive positions around the property. The first vehicle was a Millerville Police Department cruiser. The second was Chief Raines' personal truck, a lifted Ford F-250 that was well known around town. Both vehicles stopped at the edge of the crime scene perimeter, just beyond the yellow tape that marked the investigative boundary. Chief Bobby Raines stepped out of his truck with the measured movements of a man trying to project authority he no longer possessed. At 55, Raines was a 20-year veteran of small-town law enforcement, respected by the community for his folksy charm and apparent dedication to keeping Millerville safe. Now Sam saw him through different eyes, as a man who'd used that respect to build a criminal empire. "Evening, folks," Raines called out, his voice carrying the artificial friendliness that Sam recognized from their previous encounters. "Heard there was some excitement out here. Thought I'd check in, see if y'all need any local assistance." Martinez stepped forward, positioning herself between Raines and the ongoing investigation. "Chief Raines, this is a Texas Rangers operation. We have everything under control." "Now, Sergeant, no need to be unfriendly," Raines replied, his smile never wavering. "This is my jurisdiction. When we have major crimes in Millerville County, it's customary to coordinate with local law enforcement." Sam watched the exchange with growing tension. Bartoli had moved closer to the porch, the bull's protective instincts fully engaged. The animal's massive presence was reassuring, a reminder that loyalty and courage could exist even in a world where badges and uniforms no longer guaranteed honor. "Actually, Chief," Sullivan interjected, walking over with a tablet in his hands, "we've been hoping to speak with you. We have some questions about Officer Danny Reeves." Raines' smile faltered for just a moment, a micro-expression that confirmed Sam's growing suspicions. "Danny Reeves? That was years ago. Poor kid had some kind of breakdown, wandered off into the woods. We searched for weeks." "Funny thing about that," Sullivan continued, his voice conversational. "We just found Danny's body buried in Mr. Carter's barn, along with evidence that he was murdered." The silence that followed stretched across the ranch like a physical presence. Sam could hear the distant lowing of cattle in the far pastures, the hum of generators powering the crime scene lights, and the rapid beating of his own heart. Raines's face had gone pale in the harsh LED illumination. That's impossible. We investigated Danny's disappearance thoroughly. There was no evidence of foul play. There is now, Martinez said simply, including audio recordings that Danny made documenting criminal activity within your department. Deputy Tom Bradley, who had remained silent beside the patrol car, suddenly stepped forward. His hand was resting on his sidearm, and his body language had shifted from casual observation to tactical alertness. Chief, Bradley said quietly, maybe we should discuss this privately. Sam realized with growing horror that he was witnessing the moment when a criminal conspiracy decided to eliminate witnesses. The Rangers were outnumbered, surrounded by local law enforcement officers who'd already committed murder to protect their secrets. Bartoli sensed the escalating danger and positioned himself directly between Sam and the police vehicles. The bull's massive body blocked the sight lines from the officers to the porch, creating a living shield that spoke to the depth of the bond between man and animal. Nobody needs to do anything stupid here, Martinez said, her voice carrying the authority of someone trained to defuse dangerous situations. We have backup units en route, and this entire conversation is being recorded by multiple agencies. Raines laughed, but the sound carried no humor. Backup units? Sergeant, you're 40 miles from the nearest Texas Rangers office, and Deputy Bradley here has been monitoring police radio frequencies all evening. No backup is coming. The trap was closing. Sam understood now why Danny Reeves had been tortured and killed. He'd uncovered a conspiracy that reached deep into rural Texas law enforcement, possibly involving multiple agencies and jurisdictions. And now that conspiracy was prepared to kill again to protect itself. Bartoli released a deep rumbling bellow that echoed across the ranch, a sound of warning, of defiance, and of absolute loyalty to the man who'd given him a home and a purpose. The bull's courage in the face of mortal danger reminded Sam of everything he'd learned about standing up for what was right, regardless of the cost. The final confrontation was about to begin. The standoff stretched across the ranch yard like a taut wire ready to snap. Chief Raines and Deputy Bradley stood beside their vehicles, hands resting on their weapons, while the Texas Rangers maintained defensive positions around the crime scene. The forensics team had quietly moved behind the barn, following emergency protocols for active threats. Sam remained on his porch with Bartoli positioned protectively in front of him, the bull's massive presence a living barrier between the corrupt officers and their intended target. The animal's intelligence was remarkable. Bartoli understood the tactical situation and had positioned himself to provide maximum protection. You know, Bobby, Sam said, his voice carrying across the tense silence, I remember when you first joined the force. You were Danny's age, maybe younger, full of ideals about serving and protecting. Raines' laugh was bitter. Ideals don't pay for equipment, Sam. Don't fund training or community programs. Sometimes you have to work with the system that exists, not the one you wish you had. The system that exists includes torturing and murdering young officers who try to do their jobs, Martinez interjected, her weapon drawn but pointed downward. Danny Reeves was 28 years old with twin daughters. Danny was naive, Bradley spoke for the first time, his voice tight with stress. He couldn't understand that sometimes the greater good requires difficult choices. Sullivan had been quietly working his radio, and now he looked up with a grim smile. Interesting thing about backup, Chief. You were monitoring Millerville County frequencies, but we operate on secure state channels. FBI units are about 12 minutes out. Raines's confident expression faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Sullivan held up his radio. Would you like to listen in on the tactical frequency? The sound of distant helicopters began to echo across the East Texas landscape, growing stronger by the moment. Raines looked toward the sky, his face pale in the crime scene lighting. The conspiracy that had operated in shadows for 8 years was about to be exposed by federal law enforcement. It's over, Bobby, Sam said, rising from his rocking chair. You can surrender now, or you can add more murders to your list. But either way, Danny's evidence is going to bring down everyone involved in this operation. Bradley's nerve broke first. The younger deputy drew his weapon, swinging it toward Martinez with desperate speed. But he'd underestimated Bartoli's protective instincts. The bull exploded into motion with surprising agility for an animal weighing 2,000 pounds. Bartoli charged across the yard, his massive head lowered, covering the distance to Bradley in seconds. The deputy's shot went wide as the bull slammed into him, sending the officer flying backward into his patrol car with bone-crushing force. The impact triggered chaos. Rains drew his weapon and fired twice at Martinez, who dove behind a crime scene vehicle for cover. Sullivan returned fire, his bullets sparking off Rains's truck as the chief took refuge behind the engine block. Sam threw himself flat on the porch as gunfire erupted around him. Bartoli had wheeled around after neutralizing Bradley and was now positioning himself between Sam and Rains, the bull's protective fury undimmed by the violence surrounding him. "Give it up, Rains," Martinez shouted from cover. "You're outnumbered and surrounded." "Not yet, I'm not," Rains replied, firing at the crime scene lights to create darkness and confusion. But the approaching helicopters were equipped with searchlights that now swept across the ranch, illuminating the scene in brilliant white light. FBI tactical units fast-roped from the aircraft, surrounding the property with overwhelming force. Rains realized his situation had become hopeless. Trapped between Texas Rangers and federal agents, with his partner unconscious and his escape routes cut off, the corrupt chief made one final desperate play. He turned his weapon toward Sam. "This is your fault, old man," Rains screamed. "You and that damn bull should have minded your own business." Bartoli sensed the threat and launched himself at Rains with the fury of an animal protecting his family. The bull's charge carried him directly into the line of fire as Rains pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed across the ranch with the finality of judgment. Bartoli staggered but continued his charge, his momentum carrying him into Rains and slamming the corrupt chief to the ground. The impact knocked Rains unconscious, his weapon spinning away across the gravel. Sam scrambled off the porch toward his fallen companion. "Bartoli! No, boy!" The bull was down, breathing heavily, blood seeping from a wound in his shoulder. But his dark eyes remained alert, fixed on Sam's face with the absolute trust that had defined their 8-year partnership. "Easy, boy," Sam whispered, kneeling beside the wounded animal. "You did good. Such a good boy." FBI medics were already responding, treating both Bartoli's wound and Deputy Bradley's injuries from the bull's charge. Agent Sarah Chen, the tactical team leader, surveyed the scene with professional efficiency. "Mr. Carter, are you injured?" "I'm fine," Sam replied, not taking his eyes off Bartoli. "But my bull took a bullet protecting me. He's the real hero here." Agent Chen looked down at the massive animal, noting Bartoli's protective positioning even while wounded. "We'll get him the best veterinary care available. Animals like this don't come along often." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Danny Reeves's hidden evidence documented 8 years of corruption involving not just the Millerville Police Department, but connections to drug trafficking networks operating across 3 states. Chief Rains and 12 other officers were ultimately convicted on federal charges ranging from drug trafficking to murder. The corruption had reached into city government, with several council members and the mayor receiving kickbacks from the operation. The investigation led to 34 arrests and the complete reorganization of Millerville's law enforcement structure. But for Sam, the most important outcome was simpler. 3 months after that night, he sat on his rebuilt porch watching Bartoli graze in the pasture. The bull had recovered fully from his gunshot wound, though he carried a slight limp that served as a permanent reminder of his courage. The old barn had been demolished and replaced with a new structure. Sam couldn't bear to keep the building where Danny Reeves had been buried for 6 years. The new barn was bright and clean, with windows that let in natural light and modern ventilation that ensured no secrets could be hidden in its shadows. Helen Morrison, Danny's widow, had become a regular visitor to the ranch. She often brought her teenage daughters to see Bartoli, teaching them about courage and loyalty through the story of the bull who'd exposed their father's killers. "Danny would have loved him," Helen said during one visit, watching Bartoli demonstrate his protective instincts by keeping himself between the girls and the edge of the pasture. "He always said animals were the most honest judges of character." Sam nodded, stroking Bartoli's massive neck. The bull leaned into the touch, a gesture of affection and trust that never failed to move the old rancher. The Texas legislature had passed a resolution honoring Bartoli's service in exposing police corruption. Several law enforcement agencies had requested the bull's genetics for breeding programs, hoping to develop animals with similar protective instincts and intelligence. But Sam had declined all offers. Bartoli wasn't a commodity to be exploited. He was family. The ranch had returned to its peaceful rhythms, but with a deeper sense of purpose. Sam used the reward money from solving Danny's murder to establish a foundation supporting families of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. The foundation operated from his property, ensuring that Bartoli's legacy would continue long after both of them were gone. As the sun set behind the rolling hills of East Texas, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sam reflected on the lessons of that terrible and wonderful night. Corruption could hide in the shadows for years, but truth had a way of surfacing when faithful hearts refused to be silenced. Bartoli had taught him that loyalty wasn't about blind obedience. It was about standing up for what was right, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, and never backing down when justice was at stake. The bull who'd refused to enter the old barn had ultimately led them all into the light. This story reminds us that courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge when justice hangs in the balance. Sam Carter, at 62, discovered that his life's most important chapter began when he thought his story was nearly over. And Bartoli proved that loyalty and love transcend species, creating bonds that can expose corruption and restore faith in what's right. Have you ever witnessed an animal's protective instincts reveal hidden dangers? Share your stories of loyalty, courage, and the unexpected heroes who've made a difference in your life. Bull roared and refused to enter the old barn. Farmer went inside and froze in shock.